In a world not too dissimilar from our own, the tables had turned quite literally. For centuries, humans had been the prey, hunted by the animals they once feared, but that was in the distant past. Now, humanity had risen to the top of the food chain, and what was once a terrifying hunt for survival had become a gastronomic adventure. It started with the discovery of ancient culinary techniques. An eccentric group of chefs and scientists began experimenting with the flesh of apex predators, lions, tigers, great white sharks, and even the formidable crocodile. They found that cooking these beasts was no different from preparing more common meat. And soon, gourmet restaurants around the world were serving exotic dishes that once would have sent shivers down anyone's spine. The concept of eating apex predators took off in the bustling cities of the world. What was once considered taboo had become a trend. High-end steakhouses offered predator plates, featuring succulent cuts of lion ribs, seared shark steaks, and tender tiger loin. The idea was not just about the thrill of eating a creature at the top of the food chain, but also about challenging the status quo of what could be consumed. One evening, at a luxurious rooftop restaurant in New York City, a group of wealthy diners sat around a large, polished table. The waiter, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, placed a platter in front of them with a dramatic flourish. On it was a beautifully cooked portion of jaguar, its skin crisp to perfection, the meat tender and marbled with fat. "How is it?" the waiter asked as the diners took their first bites. "It's absolutely divine," said one patron, a billionaire entrepreneur who had made his fortune in tech. "I never thought I'd be sitting here eating a predator, but there's something primal about it." Another diner, a famous movie star, nodded in agreement. "It's rich, almost like a mix of venison and lamb. The flavor is intense. It's not something you'd forget." Nearby, a couple was savoring a delicacy known as shark tartare. It was served with a sprinkle of caviar and a dash of freshly squeezed lemon, the shark's raw flesh still glistening from the ocean's depths. The woman, a renowned art critic, smiled with a sense of satisfaction. "You know, we used to fear them," she said, taking another bite. "Now we just eat them." In the kitchen, the chefs were hard at work, slicing through a majestic lion carcass, carefully removing each cut of meat with precision. The lion, once revered as the king of beasts, had become just another ingredient in a sophisticated recipe. The chef, who had once been a zoologist, now found himself overseeing the preparation of creatures that, only a few generations ago, were seen as symbols of untouchable power. But the global fascination with eating apex predators had its consequences. Environmentalists and conservationists raised concerns. Apex predators were essential to maintaining the balance of ecosystems. Without them, prey populations would explode, and the environment would suffer. Many argued that eating these creatures could hasten their extinction. "We are what we eat," said Dr. Isabella, a leading biologist, during a televised debate. "By consuming these predators, we are erasing them from the planet. It's a cycle of destruction that we can't afford." But the trend continued, with culinary enthusiasts eager to experience what was once unimaginable. In underground circles, there were whispers about eating even rarer animal creatures from the depths of the Amazon or the frozen tundra of the Arctic. The hunt for novelty was insatiable. Despite the moral debates and environmental concerns, the people continued to feast. For many, it was not just about food, it was about power and the ultimate statement of dominance. By eating the apex predators of the world, they were asserting their place at the top of the hierarchy, transcending the fear that had once bound humanity. At the end of the evening, as the guests sipped their aged whiskey and chatted about the latest headlines, the world outside remained in a delicate balance. The Earth, while teeming with life, was also a vast, complex web of predators and prey. And in this new age of human consumption, the most powerful creatures of the planet had become little more than delicacies on the dinner table and nonchalantly devoured, and then forgotten. As the culinary revolution continued to grow, so did its controversial reach. Around the world, more and more high-end restaurants opened with a singular mission to serve the rarest and most feared creatures on the planet. In Tokyo, one such restaurant prided itself on its ability to source and prepare the meat of creatures thought to be invincible. The place was known as the Hunter's Feast, a dimly lit, upscale establishment that seemed to have its own quiet, unsettling energy. Inside, the walls were lined with the bones of lions and wolves, framed like artwork. The menu boasted not only the expected tigers and sharks, but also the darker, more dangerous options, the polar bear, the alligator gar, and even the elusive snow leopard. But what caught the attention of food critics and thrill seekers alike was the rarest offering of all, the human predator. It was said to be a delicacy, unlike any other sourced from the top 1% of humanity's most elite hunters. The meat of an apex predator wasn't just about the thrill of dominance, it was an experience that spoke to humanity's oldest instincts. Those who consumed it felt connected to something primal, something ancient, and there was something almost intoxicating about the idea of tasting the very essence of the Earth's most skilled predator, humankind. A dinner at the hunter's feast wasn't a simple meal, it was an event, an exclusive, invitation-only gathering of the rich and famous, a gathering where normal rules didn't apply. The restaurant's most famous dish was the hunters cut a carefully prepared portion of human flesh from those deemed worthy by the owners, who were known to hold a mysterious and almost godlike status in the world of apex predators. The preparation was said to be nothing short of sacred. The meat was marinated for days in a blend of rare spices and fermented in ancient techniques. Then, it was slow-cooked over an open flame, giving it a smoky, charred aroma that permeated the entire dining room. Those who dined at the hunter's feast would speak in hushed tones of the power they felt after their meal, a heady, almost intoxicating rush that few could ever replicate. It was not only the elite who took part in this strange culinary tradition. In many parts of the world, people gathered in private circles to share stories of their experiences. Some even began to document the origins of their meals, making a point of how they had earned their place in this strange new world. It was said that eating an apex predator like the tiger or lion was an achievement, an acknowledgement that the person who partook in the meal had transcended the human experience, becoming something more. But there was one lingering question: how far would humanity go in its quest for dominance over nature? The lines between what was acceptable and what was morally indefensible had become increasingly blurred. As the demand for rarer, more dangerous creatures grew, so did the controversy surrounding it. Ethical debates raged, and animal rights groups protested outside these restaurants, claiming that such practices were a gross violation of the natural order. Despite the growing outcry, the industry continued to thrive. In private conversations behind closed doors, even some of the world's most prominent environmentalists quietly admitted that they understood the allure. They, too, had experienced a visceral thrill of consuming what was once feared. For many, it had become a status symbol, a display of personal mastery over nature itself. As humans increasingly saw themselves as the ultimate predators, it was only a matter of time before the next step was taken: eating other humans. The idea of consuming human predators grew from whispers in the underground to something more tangible. It was an unsettling thought, though few were willing to openly discuss it. To cross that line, however, would challenge the very foundation of humanity's self-perception. Would it make them gods, masters of life and death, or would it strip them of their humanity entirely? The answer, for now, was elusive, but across the world, the tables continued to be set with fine china, the finest wines poured, and the world's apex predators, once revered and feared, casually devoured as a feast for the rich and powerful. In the quest to remain at the top, humanity had gone too far, perhaps not realizing that in feasting on the mightiest creatures of the earth, they might be feasting on their very soul. As the world dined on the once untouchable, only one question remained: how long could the planet's fragile balance hold before humanity itself became the next predator to be hunted? The world had entered an era of decadence and excess, one where consumption became more than just the filling of stomachs. It became a statement of supremacy, and with that statement came consequences. In the glittering cities, where luxury and indulgence mingled with fear and thrill, the appetite for apex predators reached its peak. Yet, with this insatiable hunger came a creeping realization: as the rarest and most elusive predators vanished from the wild, their presence at the dinner table grew all the more symbolic until it became something more sinister. At the hunter's feast, the menu had shifted from animals like lions and tigers to something darker, something human. The unspoken ritual that had begun in the shadows was now taking shape in the most exclusive circles. The first true human predator dish had made its debut, referred to only as the primal feast. It was said to be a transformative experience, one that promised to grant the dino the strength, cunning, and prowess of humanity's most dangerous hunters, those whose very names were whispered in awe. But it was not just the meat itself that was coveted, it was the narrative behind it. The dinos did not only consume the flesh, they became part of an elite, almost mystical tradition. To eat the primal feast meant to enter the realm of the highest apex predator, someone who had transcended normal human limitations and entered a world where only the strongest, most ruthless, and most cunning survived. The first primal feast dinner was a well-guarded secret. Invitations were sent only to the richest and most influential individuals, people who had the power to change the world. They gathered in an undisclosed location, far from prying eyes. No cameras, no journalists. The room was lavishly designed, decorated with trophies of every imaginable predator, each more exotic than the last. The air hummed with excitement and anticipation, the scent of burning wood and spices heavy in the air. Then, it arrived, the centerpiece of the evening. A table was laid out with a single dish, presented under a glass dome. When the cover was lifted, the room fell silent. The meat was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was pale and marbled, almost glowing under the lights. The texture appeared firm, yet tender. It was said to be sourced from the ultimate apex predator, the most dangerous hunter known to humankind. It was human flesh, sourced from those who have voluntarily given up their lives for the ultimate culinary experience. These weren't ordinary people. They were the chosen few, those who had lived as elite hunters, those who had made their mark on the world by conquering the most formidable creatures, and now they had chosen to become part of the meal, to offer up their bodies as the final tribute to humanity's unchallenged place at the top of the food chain. To consume this human meat was to partake in the ultimate rite of passage. The guests, each a titan in their own field, took their seats, each wondering if they were truly ready for the power this meal would bestow. The first bite was slow, measured, a delicate slice of the rarest and most taboo dish in history. The transformation was immediate. Those who partook in the primal feast spoke of feeling an incredible surge of energy, an animalistic instinct that was awakened deep within them. They felt themselves becoming more than human, faster, sharper, more intuitive. Some said they could hear things they never could before, or move with a predator's precision. Others, after the meal, claimed to feel invincible, like they could take on anything, even nature itself. But as the night wore on, and the effects of the meal took hold, the first signs of something darker began to emerge. Guests became more agitated, their eyes flashing with something primal. Some became erratic, almost violent. There were whispers of people acting out, reverting to the basest instincts, bickering over trivial things, displaying a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Rumors began to spread that the meal didn't just transform the body, it transformed the mind. Those who had consumed the primal feast started exhibiting strange behavior. They became obsessed with hunting, with domination, with control. The very nature of the feast was one of consumption, not just of meat, but of power. And once a person tasted that power, it seemed impossible to ever let go. By the time word spread about the secret gathering, it was too late. The guests who had partaken in the feast were already beginning to plot their next moves, their newfound instincts leading them toward darker, more dangerous pursuits. The elite, once bound by the rules of society, were no longer content with mere wealth and influence. They had tasted the true essence of power, and it had awakened a hunger that could not be sated by any amount of wealth or status. Environmental groups, who had once warned against the consumption of apex predators, now turned their attention to the growing danger that this new trend represented. The world had been set on a path toward dominance and excess, and now it seemed humanity itself was the ultimate prey. Ethical concerns were replaced with fear, as people realized that the very act of eating human predators might have created a new, even more dangerous breed of predator, one that could never be controlled. The societal rift grew wider. There were those who believed that humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The primal hunger awakened in those who had consumed apex predators would eventually consume them all. Others, however, saw this as the next logical step in human evolution, the breaking of all boundaries. the final ascension into the true rulers of the earth. As the dinner tables filled with the flesh of the world's most powerful creatures, the lines between predator and prey grew ever more blurred. Humanity had feasted on the greatest predators, but as the hunger for power and dominance continued to rise, the true question became, who, exactly, was the apex predator now? And as the world watched, the elite dinosaurs who had once dined on lions and tigers now found themselves looking over their shoulders, wondering who would be the next hunter. As the hunger for ultimate dominance spread across the globe, the consequences of humanity's insatiable appetite began to unravel in ways no one had anticipated. The primal feasts, once an exclusive indulgence of the elite, had now given birth to a new world order. A quiet but powerful movement was emerging, a rebellion, not against the rich or powerful, but against the very nature of humanity's existence. It started small whispers in back alleys, secret gatherings in remote places, and increasingly cryptic messages broadcast in encrypted forms. These groups called themselves the Last Guardians, and they believed that the global consumption of apex predators, especially humans, had corrupted the very soul of the earth. They saw it as more than just a culinary trend. They saw it as a dangerous erosion of the natural world's balance, one that could lead to the collapse of not just ecosystems but civilization itself. The Guardians knew that humanity had always been at odds with nature. For centuries, we had destroyed habitats, hunted species to extinction, and overthrown ecosystems to build our cities and industries. But what the elite dinos didn't realize was that nature wasn't just a passive entity to be conquered. Nature fought back, and in ways no one could predict, it was beginning to respond. At first, it was a subtle shift in the natural order. Populations of prey species began to rise at alarming rates. Ecosystems, once finely tuned, began to spiral out of control. In the jungles of Africa, the dwindling population of apex predators had left a vacuum, and the populations of herbivores, unchecked, began to devastate plant life. The oceans, stripped of their great sharks and orcas, saw an overabundance of smaller predators, disrupting food chains that had existed for millions of years. It was an imbalance, a distortion of the planet's natural rhythm, and it was spreading. But the most terrifying shift was occurring in the human race itself. Those who had consumed the primal feast and other apex predator dishes began to exhibit increasingly erratic behavior. At first, it was just heightened aggression, competitive, territorial instincts that couldn't be tamed. But as time went on, something darker began to manifest. People began to lose the ability to empathize with others, their former connections to their fellow humans withering away. The primal urges awakened by consuming human meat were not limited to power. They extended into something far more dangerous: the desire for control, for subjugation, and eventually, for extermination. Small factions of once respected political figures, business leaders, and cultural icons began to emerge, calling themselves the Alpha Collective. They believed that humanity's next evolution was to establish an aristocracy, a society where only the strongest, most cunning individuals could survive. These new leaders, stripped of any social veneer, felt no guilt about their power or their disregard for anyone beneath them. The Alpha Collective's rise marked the beginning of an era of chaos, where the natural order of humanity and the earth were nothing more than relics of the past. But the Last Guardians knew that to combat this rising tide, they had to act fast. They had spent years gathering evidence, compiling data, and mobilizing their forces. It was clear that humanity's obsession with apex predators had triggered something irreversible, and they understood the consequences of not stopping it before it was too late. They began to strike back in the most direct way they could through sabotage. They infiltrated the facilities where the rarest and most endangered apex predators were kept, disrupting the illegal trade that had sprung up around them. They hacked into the systems of the most prestigious restaurants, leaking information about the origins of their dishes, information that shocked the world. The elite chefs were forced into hiding as governments cracked down on the increasingly volatile trade. It was a battle between two visions of the future, one where humanity would use its dominance over the planet to consume and destroy everything in its path, and another where the Earth's natural balance could still be restored, if only the people would wake up and recognize the cost of their gluttony. Then, one day, the unthinkable happened. The Guardians succeeded in capturing one of the most dangerous figures in the Alpha Collective, Darius King, the most influential and feared of the New World's elite leaders. King was a former tech mogul who had once pioneered the creation of artificial intelligence systems designed to enhance human cognition. But now, he was a ruthless hunter, known for orchestrating and overseeing the slaughter of endangered species to feed the growing demand for apex predator dishes. The last Guardians did not seek vengeance, but they understood the King was a symbol of the corruption at the heart of the predator-eating world. They decided to expose him for what he had become, a living example of humanity's unchecked hunger. They captured him during a private feast, where he was poised to consume the final course of the ultimate primal feast, human flesh, from one of his own inner circle, a member of the Alpha Collective who had volunteered to become part of the meal. The Guardians broadcasted his arrest live, showing the world not just the man behind the destruction, but also the cost of such indulgence. It was an act of defiance, a stark reminder that there were still people who remembered the natural order, people who would fight to preserve it. The message was clear: consumption of apex predators, particularly humans, was no longer a luxury, it was a threat to everything that had ever made the world worth living in. The Guardians vowed to stop the Alpha Collective and bring the Earth back into balance before it was too late. But as the world watched Darius King's arrest unfold, a new, unsettling reality began to emerge. The hunger for dominance was no longer just a desire, it was becoming a disease, spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. And as humanity's deepest instincts were laid bare, the true question loomed: how long before the predators were no longer those we consumed, but those who had once been the prey? The balance had already tipped, and now the world was waiting to see who would emerge as the true apex predator in the new age. The arrest of Darius King was only the beginning. The world walked in stunned silence as the authorities closed in on the leaders of the Alpha Collective. The message, broadcast globally, reverberated through society like a seismic shock, but it was far from enough to stem the rising tide of chaos. As the world's elite scrambled to protect themselves, society's fractures deepened. The last Guardians, emboldened by their victory, began to organize more openly, but their efforts were met with violent resistance. The Alpha Collective's influence ran deep, far beyond the high society circles of chefs and businessmen. It had embedded itself within governments, militaries, and even the scientific community. Those who had tasted power, who had consumed what was once feared, were no longer willing to let go. Their control over the food chain was absolute, and the idea of returning to a time when nature held sway seemed impossible. The Guardians, though small in number, had gained followers in unexpected places. The lower classes, once resigned to their place in a system dominated by the wealthy, found solidarity in the Guardians' message. They saw the feasts, the carnage, and the unchecked greed of the elite as a reflection of their own subjugation. They, too, had been consumed by a system that fed on power, on hunger, on cruelty. But as much as the Guardians were gaining ground, they were also becoming more desperate. The balance they fought to protect was slipping away, faster than they could restore it. They knew that confronting the Alpha Collective in open battle would be impossible. This wasn't a fight of strength, but of ideology. The elites had no intention of relinquishing their place at the top, and their understanding of the primal nature of humanity had led them to a terrifying conclusion: power, once tasted, could never be relinquished. The world's ecosystems, once vibrant and full of life, were now failing in unpredictable ways. The unchecked hunting of apex predators had caused a cascading collapse. Without predators to control populations, herbivores overran forests, fields, and jungles, devouring entire ecosystems before they could regenerate. The oceans, bereft of their great sharks and orcas, saw an explosion in the numbers of smaller, more aggressive creature species that could no longer maintain the balance of the deep. Coral reefs, once teeming with life, were now ghostly, silent graveyards of the seas. The environment, in its slow and inevitable rebellion, had started to strike back. At first, it was small things, unusual storms, crop failures, and unseasonable weather patterns. But soon, larger disruptions became apparent. Wildfires, droughts, and floods ravaged the once stable regions of the world. Forests burned with an intensity not seen in decades. The seas churned with terrifying force, sending waves of destruction to coastal cities. Scientists, once dismissing these events as part of the cyclical nature of the Earth's climate, began to notice a disturbing trend. The frequency and severity of these events were increasing at an alarming rate. The balance had been broken not just in the natural world, but in the human psyche. As the Guardians began to strike at the Alpha Collective, they realized that they were fighting not just for the environment, but for the very essence of humanity itself. The elite, who had become something altogether different after their feasts, no longer cared for the welfare of their fellow humans. They were no longer just men and women. They had become something else, a part predator, part ruler, part god. The more they consumed, the less human they became, until some claimed that they could no longer even see the rest of the world as equals. They saw it, all animals, humans, ecosystems, as fuel for their insatiable hunger. But even within the Alpha Collective, cracks were beginning to show. The transformation that had begun in the feasts was spreading like a disease, not just to the body, but to the mind. The more the elites feasted on apex predators, the more they began to lose touch with reality. What had started as a desire for power had become an uncontrollable need and addiction, and with that addiction came paranoia. A schism emerged within the Alpha Collective. Some of its leaders, disillusioned by the violent hunger they had awakened, began to see the inevitable collapse ahead. They sought a way out, a way to break free from the very system they had created. But those who had risen to the top through their brutal indulgences saw this as weakness. The world was theirs to control, and they would stop at nothing to preserve it. Those who resisted were silenced in shadowy, terrifying ways. As the Guardians pushed back with their campaign of sabotage and exposure, the elite's paranoia grew. They turned on each other, undermining their own power structures, causing more instability than ever before. The world, once an ordered, predictable place, had become a battlefield for dominance, and not just for the future of humanity, but for the planet itself. Then, the unthinkable happened. In an effort to regain control and quell the growing chaos, a faction of the Alpha Collective unleashed a catastrophic act of defiance. They had always held a belief that the only way to secure humanity's future was to become the ultimate predator, to remove all other competition. In a last-ditch effort to solidify their reign, they launched a series of covert strikes to hunt the last remaining apex predators in the wild beyond tigers and lions. They sought to eliminate the most dangerous creatures on Earth: the elephants, the whales, the rhinoceroses, the great apex creatures that had once roamed the planet freely. The idea was simple: by wiping out the largest remaining predators, they would secure complete, unchallenged dominance, and no creatures left to threaten them. No animals capable of fighting back. With their total control over the food chain, they believed humanity would reach its final, unassailable pinnacle. But this catastrophic move would have a far-reaching impact. The final act of greed and hunger had set in motion a chain of events no one could predict. Without these apex creatures to maintain the delicate balance of nature, the Earth itself began to deteriorate at an accelerated pace. The oceans, the skies, the land of every corner of the Earth began to grow hostile. The planet's once vibrant ecosystems, already fragile from decades of exploitation, began to collapse in real time.